handed the next student in line the microphone. And in a timid voice, they asked me, "Why did you write? Was it to help you get rid of your worry thoughts?" After my heart got done melting into a puddle on the floor, I looked at them and said, "Yes, that's why I wrote when I was your age, and it's why I keep writing today." Something powerful happens when a thought moves from our head to our heart and out through our hand. Those thoughts are like tiny seeds, and they'll wither or bloom depending on how we tend to them. The reason I was even answering this 12-year-old's question was that my sixth grader said to her language arts teacher, "My mom wrote a book." To which the teacher said, "Well, she should come talk to our class about what it's like to be an author." And I thought, great idea, until I found myself standing in front of 300 12-year-olds in the school cafeteria before they had eaten lunch. It was terrifying. But there was something really special about being with a group of kids the same age I was when I started studying my thoughts. I began writing when I was 8 years old, and specifically, I wrote in this Hello Kitty diary, gifted to me by my sister, Nikki, for Christmas in 1988. And at that age, I wrote about what you might imagine someone that age would write about. What I had for supper, typically a casserole and always a vegetable. What TV shows and movies we were watching at the time, and always a fit check. Headband, bow, usually neon. But as I got older, as I got closer to the age of the kids in that room, that Hello Kitty diary gave way to blue hearts and stars, and eventually the leather-bound version with the tiny lock and key. And the thoughts in those journals were deeper, darker, more honest. I wrote about love and war. I wrote about hope and fears. It was all in there. Even at a young age, I could tell I was planting something powerful with every word I wrote. I went deeper with my thoughts in college. I majored in psychology. In graduate school, I studied organizational behavior, which led to leadership positions in the Fortune 100, all the while filling these volumes with more thoughts. I was always planting seeds. Now, nothing about this journey surprised my classmates or even my mom, who's also here today, because they always knew me as someone who was studying thoughts. After a failed 7th grade science project on composting, I decided that I wasn't meant to study dirt. I was meant to study something more interesting and intangible: thoughts. That's why I became an amateur social psychology researcher in junior high and high school, which basically meant as a teenager, I carried around a clipboard and I made adults feel very uncomfortable by asking them about their thoughts and their feelings. And year after year, even though I asked different people different questions, I always came to the same conclusion: our thoughts matter. They will either wither or bloom depending on how we tend to the soil. A little over 10 years ago, I stopped. I stopped writing. I stopped studying my thoughts. I'm not sure if it's because I had the big job or the little kids, but I just stopped. I call that season my drought. I could have remained there. I could have withered and gone dormant. But instead, I decided to get help. And help came in the form of my coach, Michelle. And with her support and guidance, I started blooming again. She asked me one question that changed my life. What did I enjoy doing as a child that I was no longer doing as an adult? The answer was obvious and immediate: writing. She said, "Go do it." So I started writing again, first for myself, then for other people, and I thought, wow, this is what I'm meant to be doing. except there was still something missing. You see, even though I knew how to write my thoughts and study my thoughts, I still didn't know how to shift my thoughts. Until January of 2020, when I came across one piece of data that pulled everything together. In order to be in an optimistic state of mind, we have to have 3 positive thoughts to counter every 1 negative thought. 3 to 1. With that piece of data, I knew what I was meant to be doing with my life. I was meant to live my life in a 3-to-1 ratio. I was meant to raise my family in a 3-to-1 ratio, and I was meant to help other people do the same. Not only did I keep writing, but I started experimenting again. And over the past year, I've had hundreds of people across multiple cities participate in a simple exercise. And before we get started, I always ask them a question, and I'm going to ask you that question today. So are you ready to answer a question? Yes. Okay. How many of you would like to experience more positive than negative thoughts? Okay, I love that you laughed because it's like, obviously, yes, of course. Then I hand them 2 stacks of cards, a pink stack and a green stack. And on the pink cards, I ask them to write their negative, nagging, worry thoughts. That voice that wakes you up in the night and says, you're not good enough. They're gonna figure you out. Just play small. Then on the green cards, I ask them to write something different. I ask them to write words of encouragement, favorite quotes, notes of positivity and possibility. And when they're done writing their cards, I ask everybody to stand up and walk around the room and plant those seeds of positivity and possibility with everybody else in the room. Once they've distributed all their cards and they've gotten their appropriate ratio back, 3 green for every 1 pink card, they take their seats. And before they even look at their cards, the room feels different. The vibe is higher. It has aura. Is that what the teenagers would say? My daughters are cringing right now. They'll correct me later. But it feels different. And then they start looking at their cards, and I notice usually the following 3 reactions. 1, laughter. 2, smiles. And 3, water leaking out of eyes. Now, what happens and is planted in those rooms is powerful, but it's what happens in the days, weeks, and months that come that I find even more powerful. I receive messages from people that say, I kept that stack of cards. I look at it on days when I'm not feeling great. Or, I was there with my team that day. That exercise changed how we treat each other. In one case, I heard from a participant who said, I couldn't read the cards in the room that day. I was carrying something way too heavy. But in private later, when I looked at them, there was 1 card that said exactly what I needed to hear to help pull me through. How did that person know? In Las Vegas, I decided to have fun with this experience, and I invited a lucky volunteer to come forward and have their entire deck of cards read out loud in front of the room. And I had a very eager participant. She was big energy, full enthusiasm. She was meant for that moment. She came up and I said, are you sure you want me to read all of these cards out loud, even the pink ones that you wrote? She said yes. I started with her pink cards, her negative, nagging, worry thoughts. And as I read aloud her honest words, there was a stillness that came across the room because there was this collective feeling of me too. I feel that way too. Then I turned to her green cards and they were lovely. They said things like, when you shrink, others can't grow. You are enough, and simply smile. And then I got to her last card. I looked at the card. I looked out at the audience. I looked at the card. I looked out at the audience. And in a voice that I'm pretty sure is reserved for middle school teachers on cafeteria duty, I said, whoever wrote this card, you know who you are. And I proceeded to read aloud. Guess what? Turned it over. Chicken butt. Yes, the room erupted in laughter, and it was perfect. It was perfect. Because in a world that's heavy and filled with weeds, we need laughter. We need lightness. We need blooms. Today, I am not asking you to get rid of all your negative thoughts. That is not how this works. I am asking you to plant more and to notice what's growing. I want you to take your thoughts from your head to your heart out through your hand. I want you to write down your worry thoughts so they might wither a little more quickly. More importantly, I want you to write down notes of possibility and positivity for yourself and for others. You have no idea what seed you might plant will help someone else bloom. I am inviting you to be a gardener, not a complainer, a nurturer, not a negator, a cultivator, not a critic, because our thoughts grow. Plant wisely. Thank you.